Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, October 2nd, 2020, Friday Mudhākara after the Majlis. The time of the Prophet ﷺ and of his Ummah is the best of times. The previous nations who lived under the presence of one of the Prophets, they were living under one aspect of the Nabi Mohamed ﷺ. It was the unfolding of one of the dimensions of the Prophet ﷺ. In his time, all of those dimensions of perfection are brought together in his perfection ﷺ. After him, the unfolding of his completion also occurs, and so the rewards are more abundant and spiritual openings are more accessible and so on. There's hadith to the effect that the age of the Ummah is 1 day and a half. And a day for your Lord is like 1,000 years. So the scholars say that it's 1,500 years. That's the average age of the Ummah of the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. And the Shaykh commented on it, and he said that the 1,500 is divided into three, 500, 500, 500. And the first 500 is like Islam and the establishment of the schools of law and so on. The second is of Iman, the faith, theological. And then the third is Ihsan, whereby you have sort of like the late flowering of Tasawwuf in the later period of Islam. Then the Shaykh, as has been his habit over the last several weeks, he's been commenting on Surah Taha. And he commented on إِذَا رَأَى نَارًا فَقَالَ لِأَهْلِهِمْ كُثُوا. When Sayyidina Musa sees a fire, when he saw a fire, and said unto his family, Stay here, verily I perceive a fire, perhaps I shall bring you a brand therefrom, or find guidance at the fire. And the Shaykh here commented on the calling, the nida, إِذْ رَأَى نَارًا, and there's a permission. When you hear the call to prayer, the adhan, there's an implication that you've heard the idhan, the permission for the prayer, to enter into converse through the canonical prayer. The adhan denotes this qualification or specification of the time for the ritual. And Sayyidina Musa ﷺ is called as well. So he tells his family to stay, and he arrives at the Holy Land, and that's where he has the encounter, not in the castle of the Pharaoh, not with Shu'aib, his prophet and mentor, but he abandons them and he abandons his own family, and he says, Stay here. And he's perfected his work, he's perfected his worship and practice under Shu'aib for 8 to 10 years, and by virtue of that he has the ability to discern and identify the disclosure site, the majla of guidance, which is in the form of that fire that he perceives. And so he arrives at this intermediary between him and his Lord, which is the disclosure of Allah Ta'ala in the form of this flaming tree. And there he has direct recognition of what it is. And the Shaykh says, if you arrive at your intermediary and you don't hear or understand the call of your Lord, then you're someone who's been cut off from the grace of your age. You've been cut off from the bounties of your own time. And your vision, your inner vision, is sealed up. Sayyidina Musa's vision of the flame. This is the best day of his life when he saw that fire. This really is his birth. And everything else in comparison to that moment, that encounter, is perishing. This encounter that Sayyidina Musa has is the best of encounters. It's the best time of his life. It's his beginning. It's the supreme moment of drawing knowledge. Before that, in relation to this moment, everything was heedless and forgetfulness. And he didn't realize the reality that he was in until that moment, till the moment he gazed at the fire with surrender, faith, affirmation, trust, and belief. And he doesn't see the fire as a fire, but as a sign of guidance and of esoteric realities from pre-eternity. He sees the mathal, the representation of the nur, and he draws countless meanings from it. The murid has direct access to the Mus'haf of Allah, God's book, but doesn't draw any meanings from it. You don't draw meanings from the wird, from the Quran, because your inner vision is sealed up and you're cut off. And that's to say nothing of those who see Nurullah and then ridicule it or ignore it or disparage it or don't work for it. What do you expect to be called a wali? You're mahrum, you're cut off. And it's really not about what you see, it's about what you draw from what you see. Is the vision granting you proximity to God? Or did you just see the illusion, the ishara, the spiritual sign, and just keep on going in your daily life? If you just see it, then it bears witness against you. But if it generates understanding, submission, insight, discourse about Allah, then you arrive at the end for which Allah Ta'ala created you. Then Allah Ta'ala says, then when he came to it, so he heads towards the fire. فَلَمَّا أَتَاهَا, he arrives at the center, the Markaziyya, the tree of the Mount of Tur. He fixes his gaze upon the tree, upon the center. And through that fixation and concentration, he grasps the language of union with Allah. Now he sees, and he receives the call. He has an understanding of the wasita, the intermediary, and of what the center is, and this supreme representation of Allah's light. And he was called Ya Musa. فَلَمَّا أَتَاهَا نُودِيَ يَا Musa. He was called by that representation itself, by the method. He heard a calling that is specific to him. He's singled out now in his age, among his people, among his family. He's called out by his name. Ya Musa. A name is not random. We're instructed to choose a name for our children, a good name. Your name is like a title, the summary of your reality. It's a synopsis. And you're the book, and that's your title. And this book carries your reality from before birth in pre-eternity to birth to this life, all the way to the day of increase, Yawm al-Mazid, if you are worthy of that station. From the moment a sperm is inseminated in the womb of the woman who carries the child, the fetus becomes a blood clot and then a complete newborn. These realities are carried within you. They come from the loins of the ancestors. All of your deeds, your characteristics, everything that makes who you are is contained in that initial seed, which creates a cell, and the cell divides into two, and one part remains unchanged. And that's what we call Ajabu Dhanab. It's the bone resembling a mustard seed, the tailbone or the coccyx, which doesn't turn into dust. And the mother, you have one part remaining in the womb, and the part in the womb gives form of the human being. He talks about it split into two parts, male and female. The other carries 46. He's referring to the chromosomes here. And the other descends and is divided into 23, or a total of 46. And the Shaykh says, you're a symbol, sense that 46 in respect of your Adamite reality. Think of yourself as cell number 46. If you visualize your reality, male or female, we add 23. This represents your gender. Shaykh talked about Ajabu Dhanab, this like seed that doesn't change, it's in the tailbone, that remains fixed at 46. And so let's say you have the name Mohamed or Idris. The cell that bears 46, if it turns to 46, when it combines to 92, that's the value of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He's like the complete, perfected human being. But for most, the second half manifests as a newborn on the earth. And if a newborn were to come out as a full 92, then you have the complete human being. And it's impossible for the perfect man to sow corruption on earth, because he would be upon the image of Rasulullah. But the higher beauty, secrets, the treasury of the individual remains within this Ajabu Dhanab. The second half remains in the womb. It undergoes change and is affected by the circumstances and surroundings. And so the child is born upon fitrah, the innate disposition of Islam. And the fitrah of the first cell of Ajabu Dhanab is that upon which the child is born. But then the child is affected by their surroundings. Hence the Prophet says it's the parent who turns the child into a Jew or a Christian. And so despite the first initial power that's contained within this Ajabu Dhanab, the reality of the human being splits in two, And so you have 50% a weakness. The other 50% that remains unchanged witnesses for you or against you. And you keep carrying it with it in your back, in your tailbone. It's your first pure cell, your unchanged, pure original book. And you take your book behind your back, you carry it behind your back on the day of judgment. If you reject it in the here below, if you act contrary to it, if you work on that book that you carry in your Hajabul Dhanab, if you work on it without changing its content, then the two books are equivalent, and you carry your book in your right hand on the day of judgment. And that book, its title isn't 46 or 92. It carries your name, the book of Idris, the book of Yousef, and so on. The book that you carry, that you author, is where your foot, your ear, your hand, your limbs, where they go, where they reach, what they do. If you corrupt your limbs, you spread corruption on the earth, and you corrupt your own inner book, you corrupt yourself, and you'll be ashamed of yourself, and your limbs will bear witness against you, because they bear witness to that book, that unchanged book, that you corrupted in your life in the here below, with your own corrupt book. Even though the original book, the Ajabul Dhanab itself, doesn't change, it's not affected. And it's the yardstick against which you are judged. It witnesses for or against you. And the Shaykh compared the complete form of the Prophet ﷺ to the full moon. And the method, the representation of the book of Ajabul Dhanab, is acted out in speech and in deeds. And so the form of the Prophet ﷺ witnesses for you or against you as a nation, against all creatures, because it's like the Ajabul Dhanab of the macrocosm of the whole world. Whereas your own Ajabul Dhanab, your own tailbone, is like your own yardstick or original book individually. So you have the Ajabul Dhanab of the Prophet ﷺ, you could say his form is the witness for or against everyone in creation. And so it has precedence, it's primordial, it's first in creation, and its cell is not like your cell. And your time, your life is like an offshoot of that. And some are deluded into thinking that they deserve sanctity or sainthood. Some even claimed prophecy in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But your time, what your life, what you do expresses who you are, who your book, what your book is. And this is what Sayyidina Musa ﷺ realized at this encounter, that his time, his book, his Ajabul Dhanab, everything, its beginning was with the moment he was called وَإِذْ نُودِيَ يَا مُوسَى, right there in the Surah of Taha. He's called, you could say, from the hidden book, the non-manifest realm. And he himself is like an offshoot or a branch of the Ajabul Dhanab, or the cell of Sayyidina Ibrahim ﷺ, who comes before him. And he gives news or announces. Sayyidina Musa heralds or gives news of the cell that he carries in his backbone, Sayyidina Musa's backbone, without paying attention to it. In other words, Sayyidina Musa ﷺ discovers that he himself is an echo of the Ajabul Dhanab of Sayyidina Ibrahim. And we all carry our book, likewise, like Sayyidina Musa, but we don't know what it contains until that moment of encounter, if we're blessed to have it. So to decipher your reality, you have to make a U-turn. When we say Ajabul Dhanab, this tailbone it's the treasure of the heart. Now Sayyidina Musa ﷺ, he hears and sees and speaks through God's hearing, seeing, and speech. Hence he recognizes the fire for what it is, by virtue of the years of the supererogatory deeds and devotions that he performed under Shu'aib, under his mentorship. And this precedes his encounter with the fire, with Allah Ta'ala, with the representation, the tajalli, the burning bush. And so the Shaykh says, look at your own past and recognize that it's all impure. And don't aspire to the station of those of your superiors. Just plea for God's favor, for His mercy, in the hopes of tasting something of what they've tasted. Murids will say, I invoke a lot, but my nur doesn't grow. And person X just prays 5 times a day and they see a whole sun in their invocation. This kind of murid who complains about not seeing the nur even though they do a lot of dhikr, they came with a lot of issues or impurities in their background, in comparison with person X, who comes with a lot of nawafil, devotions, prior to even meeting the Shaykh. And their encounter with the Shaykh is the moment that they take their share. The Prophet ﷺ is the distributor, Al-Qasim, and the Shaykh performs that function on his behalf. And so the murid may come to the Shaykh with a lot of nawafil and a pure past, and they take their share that is stored with the Shaykh. But you don't understand that. So don't weigh yourself against someone who sleeps and doesn't exert effort in the last third of the night and yet sees the nur, even though you stay up and you don't see it. Because if you analyze your time from age 7 to now, you'll find that it's full of corruption. What can I do with 20, 30 years of hidden idolatry, ritual impurity, forbidden things? How can you quickly wash it off and expect an illumination or a flood of light within a short period? And others still are even proud of their past, of their deeds. Those, they think that they're chivalrous, that they're in futuwa, but they're in fact in distance from Allah. If you had faith, you would forget your past. That's the key. It's better to forget your past, to renew your turning to Allah in repentance, and to renew your pledge of allegiance to Allah. If you've had a beautiful moment of sincerity with your Lord in the past, take it as a moment to think well of your Lord, not as an opportunity to become proud of your deeds. Sayyidina Musa is called Ya Musa, Idnudiya Ya Musa. The vocative here, Ya, Inni ana Rabbuk. Verily, I am your Lord. Note that Allah Ta'ala says, I'm your Lord, denoting a relationship, denoting training and nurturing. It is I who raised you. It is I who nurtured you. I fashioned you. I configured you in the way that you are, because every good deed, everything beautiful is from Allah. And the first thing in repentance is to forget oneself. You're still looking into your past, and if that's the case, then you're veiled from the very beginning of the path, which is remembrance, which is dhikr. You think about your trips and your job and your marriage and your kids and everything, and these are obstacles. Not in ma'rifah, we're not there yet. We're talking about obstacles just in dhikr, the beginning of the path. When do you become an invoker then? When you forget yourself, then you become a rememberer. You become a dhakir. Those who are constant in their remembrance are those who have forgotten themselves. They have become absent from themselves by virtue of their constancy in the remembrance, and they see no existence to themselves. Otherwise, you're attached to yourself and you're in a state of distance from the dhikr. The more you forget yourself and cast yourself into the divine presence, the more of a rememberer and a dhakir you become. Allah Ta'ala says, Verily I am thy Lord, Inni ana Rabbuk. What's your turning? What's your wijha? I am your Lord. What are you in relation to me? This is enough. I am the one who presides over your affairs. I am your wali, your guardian. I am waliul amr. I'm the one presiding over your affairs. I called you. You didn't come here, O Musa, out of your own effort. It is I who chose you. It is I who elected you. And Musa is told to take off his sandals. فَخْلَعْنَا عَلَيْكَ. Now in tafsir, if you have them on, you're still clinging to the soul, to the nafs. And Musa realizes this at the tree. He realized his location vis-a-vis the wasita. In front of the wasita, the intermediary, he wasn't clinging to the tree or the nur. He takes off his sandals. He faces his Lord. Otherwise, if you keep your sandals on and don't strip yourself of yourself and forget yourself and turn to Allah, then you're like someone facing the Kaaba but clinging to the dimensions of the Kaaba and the length and the width. You're standing in front of a corporeal body, an idol. Or you can stand before your Lord and become absent from yourself, and then you can hear the calling. So when you say Labbaik Allahumma Labbaik, if you're truly circumambulating and you're saying at thy service, then you hear the call, you hear the hatif, the disembodied inner voice, you'll hear that. Otherwise you're drowning in your own nafs, and you're attached or stuck in corporeal bodies and in spatial extensions. Now Sayyidina Musa knows his wijha. He knows what he's turning towards. And he's not asking, wait, is this an olive tree? Is it a peach tree? That's for us to obsess over. When he sees the nur, he doesn't ask, is this a reflection of my ocular eyes? Is my faculties? Is this maybe something I'm imagining? He says, I'm with the real. This is a disclosure of the real. هذا ربي. Just like Ibrahim, alayhi salatu wasalam, who sees a planet and says, this is my Lord. Not, is this Mars? Is this Venus? And so the fitrah here of Sayyidina Ibrahim and Sayyidina Musa, it's a clean, inner, innate, primordial disposition. It's pure from the very beginning. Your fitrah, on the other hand, is filthy. You don't understand the reality of what a disclosure is. You don't know where you are. You're blind within the disclosure itself. Some are in the tajalli, within the zawiyah, and yet they're thinking of sleep and food. How then will you perform at work or in the marketplace if this is how you behave in the presence of a tajalli, of a disclosure? Out there you'd just be a bum. Sayyidina Musa ﷺ is the opposite. Sayyidina Ibrahim is the opposite. They recognize things for what they are. They turn above, they look above, they gaze upon the malakut of the All-Merciful. They behold the disclosures and they connect them back to their root and they say, this is my Lord. Sayyidina Musa sees a descent upon the earth, a tanazzul. What happens to Ibrahim happens to Sayyidina Musa as well. This is my Lord. Both of them say the same thing. It's a calling within the heart. They recognize the path of guidance. They hear the calling. I am your Lord. That is to say, what's in your heart is true and it's real. Your fitrah then is pure, Ya Musa, despite being raised in the castle of someone who claimed lordship, despite the years of work and performance of deeds for Shu'aib in the mountains. You enter with this purity. You've protected it throughout the years, and so you perceive directly the truth, knowing that you're upon the path. Ana Rabbuka, I am your Lord. He knows he's calling him. Musa knows who is speaking to him. And the 2 feet, one in the dunya, one in the akhirah. He stripped himself of the 2 abodes. He has no longing for the garden or fearing of hell or attachment to the here below. Watch yourself in the fitna, in the presence of tijara, in the presence of distractions. Sayyidina Musa strips off his shoes. There's no transactioning with God anymore. He's not worshipping for compensation. The true believer is the one who sells his soul and his wealth for Allah Ta'ala. If you sell your soul, then you don't own any wealth anymore. Some are able to give up their wealth, but they cling to the nafs. They're not able to do that. Musa takes off both. He sells his soul. He's nothing. You own nothing. You throw the staff itself. The smallest claim is not even yours. This way you may know that your Lord, and that you are a servant and I'm your Lord, and you possess nothing, because I fashioned you for myself, Ya Musa. I purified you. Inni ana rabbuka, fakhla'na alayka, innaka bilwadi al-muqaddasi tuwa. Truly you are standing on holy grounds. Truly thou art in the holy valley of Tuwa. Musa knows the region intimately. He was a shepherd. He has 10 years of experience in that region. But Allah Ta'ala now calls this place holy, the holy valley. Things are given names. The Prophet ﷺ gives names to animals, inanimate creatures, homes, clothing, items, and he interacts with them. And God makes things holy, taqdees. Tuwa was known among the people of Shu'aib, but the holiness of that place is by virtue of Musa standing before the divine presence. Allah Ta'ala discloses to his servants, he discloses himself to his servant in specific places, not just anywhere, but in holy places, in exalted places. Why do we then see the nur in all places? The Prophet ﷺ says, Ya Allah, make the earth a masjid, a place of prostration for me. All of it has become holy therefore, which is why you're in the best of times. If you were among the people of Sayyidina Musa ﷺ, or before the prophets before Muhammad ﷺ, you would want to see the nur in Musa's time, then you have to go to the holy valley. In time of Sayyidina Musa, you'd have to go to Mount Tur. You'd exert effort to arrive. Now the trust is given to you, and you turn away. It seeks you, and you run from it. The earth has become holy, and you exhaust yourself and turn away from it, clinging to forms and to receptacles, and turning away from pure meanings. So from this we grasp that the presence of Al-Quddus, the Holy, is the site of the Lam al-Ishq, the Lamb of divine love. The center of the Ha is the Lamb of divine love. That's what's holy. And you turn away or toward that center. If you love it, if you hate it, that's how things are. Al-Quddus, the Holy, is at the center of the Ha. And that center of the Ha is embodied in the Khalifa, the vicegerent. Adam created in the image of God. I am the master of the children of Adam, and I do not boast. That's what the Prophet ﷺ says. I was a prophet while Adam was between clay and water. Precedence and holiness is for the Prophet ﷺ. Here it's for Musa. The Prophet hasn't appeared yet. And Musa arrives at the holy valley, Al-Wad al-Muqaddas. Here you have taqdees or takhsis, election, divine preference given to Sayyidina Musa. But he arrives at that center having gone through, there's farq, there's separation. He goes from the periphery to the center. And you don't understand the center without understanding what the periphery is. And within you, yourself, at a individual level, there's also something that's declared holy by Allah, and that's the Amriyatul Ruh, the spirit that comes from the divine command. And your body is not holy unless you have passed away in the commanding nature of lordship. Then your body becomes the holy valley of Tuwa, and your ruh becomes the blessed tree. But until you get to that point, you don't understand what the center holiness is and what the periphery is. Sayyidina Musa now is in front of the tree, and he's standing in holy grounds because he's arrived there. You arrive at that state when you pass away in the Amriyatul Rububiyyah, the commandingness, or the Lord's engendering command. Then your body becomes the holy grounds. But you're ritually impure. You're in a state of najasa. You have to purify yourself with dhikr, to shine your heart, to come to God with a sound heart, biqalbin salim. Then the Shaykh made a long, beautiful, heartfelt, tearful supplication in which he asked Allah to strengthen us with the illuminative faith of Rasulullah ﷺ, and to bless us with the love of Rasulullah and with the love of those who love Rasulullah, and with an understanding of the dimensions of his reality, and for us to take him as our prophet and messenger, and to enrapture us among the beloved of the Prophet ﷺ, and to unite us with him in the here below before the hereafter. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد.